Hey everybody, my name is Brian Zajac. I am the owner of iMagination and 3DAS, and today we're going to be doing a design presentation about prototyping without design skills in Adobe XD. You're going to be learning a lot of great things today, and hopefully some of these things you can take with you and it will save you a ton of time. Before we get started, I want to give you a little bit about who I am. So think of me as kind of your digital design partner. My first company, iMagination, has been doing website design, UIX design, anything with an interface. I've been doing since 2001. And we've done a lot of different projects around Florida, some nationally. And my other company is 3DAS. That one focuses more on 3D architecture renderings and animations. So I have this combination of 2D and 3D. And my kind of common goal is to bridge the gap between what customers are looking for and what the software developer, indie hacker, somebody is trying to develop. So the first question when you're thinking about UX or user experience design is, why do this? What's the point? If you can't answer that question, you're wasting a whole lot of time. So why should you guys, or developers in general, prototype? Well, let's look at some stats here. There's an IEEE study that says software specialists spend between around half their time doing avoidable rework. Just let that sink in for a minute. Half your time is wasted. That seems a little frustrating to me. Along with this other stat that says 61.5% of developers spend less than 4 hours a day writing code. Anybody who are developers here? Raise your hand. Okay. Just curious, how many hours do you typically code a day on average? An hour? 8, 2? You can do it a full 8.
That's what I typically do.
Wow, you're like double their study, so congratulations.
That's why I'm tired.
Yeah, that's awesome. So the average is actually 4. So just think about that. That's a lot of time that's doing reworking, and I think it's very frustrating. And I personally don't like that. I don't like how the world is kind of burdened on the software engineer, developer, whoever you might call yourself these days. I think there should be a better way to do this. And it's simply put because poor communication equals more work. What's happening here is you're developing something great that you think is great, but the partner over here is not hearing anything. And oh, by the way, that's Barry Larson, the Far Side. When I was a kid, I loved these cartoons. So how do we get them back into understanding? Well, let's first talk about retention in the way you communicate. We look at the learning pyramid. The rate of retention goes from the learning rate from top to bottom. The passive way is what I'm doing right now. The active could be taken if you're taking notes. And then we're going to be looking at the interactive, this one that goes back and forth between each other, where we learn from each other and we grow into the product itself. And I know this because right now, you're going to remember about 5% of what I just told you. Because that's what happens during PowerPoint. And I hate PowerPoints. And I'm just doing this just to give you a lesson here. Don't do too many PowerPoints. Be more interactive. Because when you're more interactive, 30% is retained when you do demonstrations. Like I want to show you today. When we have a discussion after, you're going to remember about half of it. When we're practice doing it itself, like if you and I are consulting or whatever, and we're learning XD together, you guys are learning 75%. And if you're teaching like how I am, you remember 90%. So thank you for showing up, because now I remember 90% of what I was doing in this class. So appreciate that. So when we talk about the grand scheme of creating a prototype, we can't forget about the 6 stages of the UI/UX process. I could go through all of that, but I don't want to be another boring lecture, so we're going to kind of go straight into this design aspect, and we're going to start off with an artificial intelligence prototyping engine called UIzard, and then we're going to lean that into Adobe XD, and then go from there and kind of finish it off from that point on. So let's begin. So I will show you what UIzard does, and I will run this movie first. So if you can't hear it, it doesn't really matter too much. What's happening here is that you take sketches, you upload them to the online system, it converts them sketches using machine learning and makes them into full color wireframe or full color prototypes, where you can then take them and plug them in together and create a prototype. So anybody can do that. Anybody can make sketches. You can then invite team members to understand how this process works, get comments, and that's basically what the video is showing you. So the name of the program, it's under beta right now, it's called UIzard. It's a very odd name, but cool, it works. And then you can finally share this with others.
Is that a paid tool?
Right now it's under beta, so it's not. But you have to be invited in and do your thing. So that's UIzard. Now, that's great, but I want to show you about the reality of machine learning and when it comes to prototyping in 2020. So what we have here is what they suggest you make as a wireframe. And you have to basically make a bounding box instead of not having just the prototype there. I did the same thing here. My results that I got for doing this, as you can see, it pretty much did a pretty good job here. However, the hamburger menu turned into this odd EST mark. The other stuff did a pretty good job. The desktop version didn't fare so as well. You can see that we need to have a logo, some header items, maybe a persona or a user account, hero image, and then 3 submenu items. You can see it got the hero okay. It got this is just makes a picture, some text here, but these didn't line up at all correctly. Now, again, if you're making something quick and dirty, I think it's going to work out just fine for you. And I'm not going to knock this program. I think it's fantastic that you have the ability now to be able to do this. But what I primarily do, my job is Adobe XD, and that's what we're in right now. And I'm going to give you some reasons why Adobe XD can be better for you in AI prototyping. There's other template-based systems that are out there. But Adobe XD takes it, and again, this is Adobe XD. There's other ones like Sketch and Figma. Some of these others do this too. But I found that Adobe XD works well in many other respects. And I'm going to show you some examples of why Adobe XD works better than typical AI prototyping. So the first thing I wanted to show you was we have this gallery. And in this gallery, I just created a simple wireframe. We're going to do a repeat grid to start off. And what a repeat grid allows you to do is, and if I can zoom out, there we go. It allows you to replicate very fast. You can do as many rows and columns as you like. This works well with forms. Think about if you have like a form of 20 items. Create one name and then a form element, and then you can do a repeat grid and go all the way down from there. So you can be able to do this with almost anything out there. We need to have elements that add on to here. So what we need to do is, and hopefully I'm online still. I believe I am, so give me just a moment here. Because this won't work if I'm not online. So I think I still am, so that's great. Okay, so I'm going to use a plugin called Photosplash. And then I'll click on Landscapes. It brings up these 4 landscapes, and it should be able to apply them. So there you go. It's pretty instantaneous. You can look up practically any picture you want to, and it just gives you a general idea of how to do that. Now, for me, I think that's great, but I want to be able to add in my own. So I took these landscapes that I have. I'll just take the first 6. I mean, you can do all of them, but I'll just do these first 6 and put them into here. And boom, it puts in all my pictures. Now you see where it says landscape 1, it repeats that over again. You can take a data area as simple as, like I have this, here, I'll just show you. So this is just a simple text file. You can use Google Sheets, you can use anything with databases basically to just copy over, and there you go.
So as you can see, you can quickly iterate and add in pieces as you need to. Now, some of the pieces, like this here, is too long, right? So what we have to do is we have to, when we refine parts, because the way that it works is that if you move one thing, all the other pieces move too, which can be a good thing and a bad thing. In this case, I need to ungroup this. So I'm going to go ahead and go into my layers, and I'm going to click on the landscape, and then I'm going to ungroup that grid. When I do that, it creates them in all separate groups called landscape. So I'm going to double click on this one here. It brings up this title, and then all I have to do is just make my change. And I don't know, let's say I want to make that smaller. You could do that too. Not that I would, but just to give you an idea that you could do that if you wanted to. Now the next thing that XD can do better than prototyping engines that use artificial intelligence and template-based systems is animation. I think that it really does a great job with animation. So we're going to go ahead and animate this, and we're basically going to take it from this piece here to this piece here, just enlarging it. So what you have to do is whenever you do animation, you have to have a before state and an after state. So I'll take this piece here, and I will call this Japan, because it's the whole group and the piece itself. And I also like to be able to change specific elements, and I'll call this Japan photo, because naming things in the beginning can save your butt in a lot of different times. I'll put that as Japan title. And you don't have to do this for everything, but I'm just doing this to kind of let you know how it all works itself out. Actually, that's not the photo. Give me a second. That's the photo. And this is the background title. Okay. Now, besides naming them correctly, you also need to have them be able to have the correct order. I like to put things when I animate them on top, because if they're behind, they're going to come through the other elements that you see there. So we don't want to do that. We want to animate this element and make it larger. So we're going to take this board and duplicate this board, and we're going to make this item go larger. Now you can do it like this, but it's better if you hold the shift, because it does something called responsive resize, and it auto resizes the parts for you. I am going to go ahead and make it about, let's say, that big. And then as you can see, there are elements behind here. The title's too big. So there's always ways where you have to kind of just fuss around with it, maybe make it a little bit smaller, make this piece smaller. And let's say I wanted to have it so that the background was blurred from there. I'm just going to go ahead and create a rectangle here, just a white one, get rid of the border, add a background blur to it, put that background blur just below the Japan thing. It can be finicky, however. Okay, I'll put on top, and then I'll put it below. There we go. So you can see now it's blurring the background. Now remember I told you before, if you're animating, you have to have a before and after state. Every element has to be in the previous artboard and the current artboard. So the way to do that is to copy it and put it into the other artboard here. And then make that, again, the correct layer. Make that have a 0 opacity. And then I'm going to resize this just a little bit more. And let's make a close button. Again, I'm just making something very simple and obvious for what we're trying to do. Elements, you can create them here. You've got a square, circle. You can do just about any different size that you want to with the triangle tool. For this, I'm going to just create a circle and make that circle have a 3-point stroke so you can kind of see it. And then in XD, there's a ton of different templates and elements that you can kind of use along with it. So what I like to do is get the close button here, copy that, put that into here, try to at least. There we go. Get a little bit larger. And then we're going to group that and call that close. Like I had said before, if you have it here, you got to have it here. And then make that 0 opacity. Actually, let's move that up a little bit and give it a little bit of animation that goes along with it. So do that. And then I think we're about ready to start animating and see how it works. Now remember, things might not be perfect the first time, but that's okay. So we're going to take this element, and from that gallery element, we're going to animate it here. You're going to use something called on a tap trigger. The tap trigger allows you to say that on tap, it's going to go and do something. This is going to be auto animate. It's going to basically do the animation from the state on the left to the state on the right. We'll do an ease out of, let's say, 1.2. So it has a kind of a finer animation to it. And then from here, we want to make sure that that close button goes back because, you know, you got to have start and end back to start, right? So we're going to make that go a little bit quicker. And that seems about fine. So let's go ahead and play this. If I click on it, there you go. And then you just close it. That's it. So that's the general gist of what you can do in animation. And I did that all in, what, 10 minutes? Maybe? Yeah. Right? So it's not difficult when you understand the logic a little bit. And it's actually a lot of fun. I mean, I spend hours and hours just figuring out stuff. It's a whole lot of fun just figuring out how to animate and how to do these animations. And you can create some really cool stuff. Now, there's other parts that you can do that are newer to XD, like this load more button. Let's say that we want to add that into here. If I take that button from my handy dandy list of stuff and we add it into the prototype, just take that button and stretch it out as a full width slider button and call it load more. Now there's something called components, and what components allow you to do is be able to reuse the same thing over and over again. So this group here, I'm just going to call this load more, and I'm going to make this into a component. You know that because it turns into a little diamond shape. I'll show you right here. You can right click and go make component or Control K. And what it does is that it creates a master. And from that master, you can create dependencies upon it, saying that any future button is going to change along with it. So if I make another one here, and I change the color of this, the fill of the background, let's say, it changes it along with it. Now, that might not seem like that big of an idea with 2 elements, but what about if you have an artboard of like 100 items, right? It's a pain in the butt going back and changing out 100 items. So what I suggest is making stuff a component. On top of that, components can get really intricate because you can be able to make it a default state into a hover state. So now you can have a hover state that is completely different than your standard state, which makes it a rollover. So what I mean by that, if I change the fill to, let's say, that red color, okay? The default state looks like this, but the hover state looks like that. So if I take a look here and I just play this one specific element, see? I just create a rollover button. Now, you can do all kinds of crazy stuff with this when you think in a kind of a bigger picture. And I'm going to show you what that means in just a minute here. So over to the right, when we're talking about states, you can take something like that using the component states and make something like this, where if I click on an element, it goes from one part to the other. all this is done with states. It basically says, you know, and it's all done on one artboard, which is really incredible because what you're doing is you're taking all the elements without having to take, if you take a look here, if I did something that was time-based or had to do this regularly, I'm looking at least 6 to 8 artboards, but because I'm doing it with component states, I need to use only one. So when you're doing prototyping with people, they only need to look at one thing. And when they only look at one thing, they're not confused by how things work back and forth. That being said, it's harder to understand at first. So I highly recommend people use multiple artboards to start with. For example, this hero opening that you have, I use this as a time-based. So this is a photographer and they used a parallax animation, and this allows for a time-based thing. So it goes from one image to the other to the other. So if you put this all together, you can have an incredible combination of components and time transitions into making one great looking web page like this this web page that I had made. So if we take a look here and I play this one, I can click on each individual one. I have done the gallery that we looked at, where you load more or you could load less. I even added in a map system so that when you click on it, there we go, it shows the location of where you're at, a zoom feature for maps. All this is done with component states, and then along with the form. So
This isn't a real web page, right?
No.
This is just.
I made the whole thing next.
I handed this and say, do this.
Yeah.
And they want it done in a day.
I know.
And I look at them and go, it's going to take a little bit longer to do what you can draw and make it real.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And this doesn't generate code in the back?
It does.
Okay.
Yeah. So I will hopefully, I have an internet connection. I hopefully will show you that right now. That's always the scary part. I don't know how it's going to work. But if we do the development version of this, I'll update the link. Give it a moment. So what's happening here is that it's kind of compiling all this, and it's going to put on a shareable website to where you can be able to look at different assets, some of the CSS code, and kind of put it together. Because at the end of the day, a lot of these prototype systems say that they want, like, oh, we'll do everything for you. You know, you make the prototype and we'll do all the coding and stuff, and then you developers look at it and you go, oh my God, this is a nightmare. This thing doesn't work at all. It's like on a shoestring. So I had a feeling this might happen. It's going to take a little bit. I don't know if I can make it work, but
I just feel better that it's not that simple.
yeah. Well, in order to get a concept across, though,
Yeah,
it
it's
is
fantastic.
It is fantastic, and I think that's the key here is to deliver something to different parts of the team, whether it be your friends, your colleagues, stakeholders, customer service, whoever. They have a theory of what they want to communicate. Remember, I had shown you that slide where somebody's saying something, and the dog is here, and blah 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 blah. That's what all the different people are hearing. But when you show them something visual, it solves their problem because they're like, oh, now I understand where you're going at with that. And so this is removing all that reworking and all that code. All the rest of this stuff, honestly, is great because at the end of the day, you're going to take this whole website and you're going to do it the way you do it. Because I'm sorry, that's kind of the way I've met every developer. They've always done it their own way. I mean, am I right or is there something I don't know?
Well, I was given an XD file and said, do this.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't have a choice. So fortunately, I got the XD file 2 months after I was told what it looked like. So I got PDFs of the XD, and they said, do it this way. And then they gave me the XD and said, by the way, all of the fonts are stored in the XD. And so we'll let you get the XD so that you can get the design and set the fonts correctly.
Okay, so
I have to go to each element and look at the font that's defined on each element.
well, did you see the design share component? I mean, what I'm doing right now, when you share and for developer or development, it's supposed to give you a whole list of all this stuff.
And that would be nice.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's the idea here. It's on 77%. I had a feeling this might be a problem, so we'll just weigh it off a little bit. But I'll just kind of give you a couple ideas here to think about. You just saw me do something that was encased into one page. So it was very simple and it's not complicated to understand. That's the goal here, is to make something, depending upon the stage that you're teaching, whether, a simple wireframe to all the way to a full-fledged, beautiful looking website can be done, but it's up to you. If you think that doing a sketch and putting it to UIzard is the way to go, then go for it. Like, that's the way. But if you're thinking of doing hover states, rollovers, animations, all that stuff, man, it's going to take a long time for these AI systems to make this work for you. It just won't. It'll always be screen to screen to screen kind of thing for a long time, because that's what it understands. How is it supposed to know that when you click on a hamburger menu, a new flyout's supposed to happen and have all these elements and list all this stuff? It doesn't know that. It reads elements by elements. So. Go ahead.
This looks really nice, but when it comes to using stuff like pretty much when you're doing a little JavaScript using jQuery, and I'm going to pick my terms, but pretty much all the add-ons. To function properly with those, even though this is new, what up? It looks good, but the function properly with those features at all.
Right. Okay. So. Yeah, so here's the thing, and that's always something, as whatever stage you are as a developer, you use the tool that's going to get you quickest to your result, right? So if you've got a library, like an Android library, that you just plug this element, that, a form here, graphic there, this here, you're done. Like, do it. But if you think that you need to do some of these, like micro animations or animations in general, or get a theory down that's saying, look, boss, this doesn't work. If you do it this way, this is the issues that are going to happen. Then maybe XD might be working well for you. So it's really on the specific use case that you're doing. And at the end of the day, this is a tool. I spend most of my time actually in the UX process, not the UI. And the UX process means the user experience, understanding how to make that app. What's the right use case? Are people going to buy this? Why would they buy this? And that whole list of things. So.
I have a question. You said in the beginning that developers waste almost half their time with the coding. How does this help with that?
Right. So what this does in prototyping specifically, it does two major things. It helps with the other user retaining the information because you're interactively working with them at the same time, and two, which better communication equals less issues down the road. You're basically fixing things in the front instead of all the way down the pipeline, and everybody's kind of scrambling all together trying to figure out that problem. Exactly. Yeah, and I'll get into that in a minute here. So right, if we're looking at the code here are the assets that are being listed here that you can download. The color schemes that are being used. Here are all the different character styles. So this is what you're asking for. Like, what are the fonts being used into this? So these are all the ones that are being used in the scene itself. Now, is it that you need to know that attached to that specific? Yeah, okay, I figured so. I believe they have that now. Yeah, so if I click on the element itself, you know the color.
I see the code generator in the bottom.
There you go. Yeah. So that hopefully will help you solve that problem. And it goes down to all the different elements itself too.
Yeah, my only issue with that is like it uses pixels, and that could be a problem. Like if someone looks at it on a TV or
Hey,
or
from the
mobile.
developer standpoint, I make it as close as possible from what I know, and then we take it from there.
Yeah.
If we just can't get it to the same functionality that we see in XD, then either I'm using the wrong tool, or we just can't get it there from what we would like to see. to what we can get it in the amount of time.
So why is it still a problem?
I'm sorry?
No, you were saying,
Pixels?
yeah, why is that a problem?
I heard like on a TV screen, like a pixel is like, it'll be really small. It'll be look like that on a TV screen, you know, instead of like on a monitor, like a regular website. Like the font will be super, super small.
Yeah, and that's where it comes in on the developer side of, hey, we need to resize things. So it may be a 14-point font on the web page, but on the TV, which has a different size to the screen, we can adjust it.
Yeah.
So we have that capability where you might not see something in the design that dynamically changes.
Well, what we do is we basically make it the multiple versions, and if you've got dealing with the right designer, they're supposed to understand responsive resize in XD, so they're easily to be able to manipulate it from the screen size to all the way to the TV size if they wanted to. It's a way that you modify the graphics themselves, and
so you can actually design it with the different views in mind. So you can have like a mobile, you can have a desktop, you can have a television design with the different views of it.
Yeah,
and then the developer can come along and say, okay, I can check and see what size I'm dealing with,
right,
and respond appropriately.
So for example, this here was using a bootstrap layout. So if you would know here, if I clicked on the layout, you can see the 12-column grid. So I'm following the 12-column grid in a bootstrap layout. So it will help you out to understand how it works. So, it's this kind of stuff that really is helpful. So let's go on to something, though, that is what I consider more tangible. Everybody makes a web page, I get it. But sometimes, you want to learn as maybe an indie hacker, or somebody wants to develop something, so they have to have the proper UX beforehand. So this is where I spend a lot of my time. So I recently had a meeting with a developer, and they were making an internal app for a food ordering app. And this was a UX meeting that we had. So the goal was to create here, I'll just have you read it so everybody can see. The goal is to order food for everyone in the office without a login process. The constraints are, it's made for 25 to 40 people in the office. Doesn't mean that there are going to be 25 to 40 orders. It's just that for an office that kind of size. Because for an office that's of like 3 people, you don't need something like this. It's just not worth it. The orders would need to be submitted by 10 a.m. and it's within the local area of restaurants that you'd order from. The essentials that are needed from this meeting we found were name and email address, link to the menu, food choice, and order history, and then admin managed contacts in restaurants. So you can kind of see the whiteboard that I did some of the work in here. It's a big mess, but that's what we do during UX sessions. We don't have to have it pretty. We have to figure out the logic and the essentials and the constraints and all that good stuff. And here are the essentials that I put down here. So there's that itself took about an hour and a half to 2 hours. The actual prototyping, a little bit less, but that being said, I like to embellish a few things, so it took around, a couple hours. So because I was having fun, and that's the thing. I'm quite addicted to XD. So, so what I came up with to be able to do that after a meeting is that we have a lunch order system. This here at the top, just this header, was just for ease of use and understanding how the app would kind of work. In the final version, it wouldn't have a top menu like this because it goes off to different people. The customer view would only see one type. The reviewer or the office manager, whoever submits the order to the restaurant, would see something different. And then the admin that manages the accounts would see something different. So there's no reason to have these 3 things because they're usually not all the same person. So
you have to tell the developer that.
Yeah. Oh no.
You're gonna get a page that's got all 3 of them.
I completely agree. That would be that's literally why I'm saying this first. Right. So okay. So if we take a look at how an order would be made, here's your lunch order for the day. The food is submitted by 10 a.m. This is here to click view menu. Notice that you're not seeing the name of the restaurant because what's the point? why add the extra time and code into writing the name of the where you're ordering from? They need to click on the menu anyways, so you just click on View Menu. Done. Put in your name information, your email, your what you want, and then what your restrictions are. Like this, James hates tofu. So then he can also have his order history on what he ordered before. He can like it or dislike it and go from there. So the way that looks, if I click on here, is, and by the way, give me a second here. Pass this around if anybody's interested. Yeah, I have this as a prototype on my phone, but I can also share the link to anybody too. But here would be the thing, so you can take a look and pass around. And here's the top ones for the 3 different menus. You can click on stuff and have fun, but basically they can view the menu, they can submit, and when they submit their order, the order was submitted, then there's also if it goes back and they can update their order if they messed up. Okay, and then their order history here, they can see, we can define it by 1 month, 3 months, a year, but we don't want to do it. We all figured out through the UX meeting, we don't want to have something that is going to be like for 2 years. We're not data collecting for like restaurants. Like this is not the point, because we're using office people, office employees, and we don't want to exactly share their information to others. So there should be a data cap on all this stuff. You can like or dislike. And then, it's everything, little things like, see, these are micro interactions or micro animations. This is something that you really can't do with the AI stuff yet. Like, these are really little helpful guides for people, and that can make a big difference when you're prototyping out to people. So that is the customer view. And that was only done with basically 3 screens. The order, the submit order, and then to the updating the order itself. When we go on to the food ordering app for the reviewer, that means the person who's receiving, like they've sent out this email to these people, they're receiving the responses back. This is how it would look. So you've got all the names and what they liked and disliked. So James obviously hates his tofu. And then there's other people who ordered stuff. And Julie is the opposite, and because James has no idea what he's talking about. And then finally it saves as a PDF, and that PDF basically is the thing that's going to save into an email or to whatever to the restaurant. Here's the order submission, here's what it looks like, it's all laid out. And that would be in a completely different layout itself, defined later, because we don't want to define all that stuff right now, like how the PDF would look, because why change all that stuff when you don't need to? Yeah.
At this point, are you thinking about what platform it's going to be on? Is it Android or it's going to be iOS app, or
right.
How do you sort of navigate that?
So this is dependent upon who's going to make the development of it. I look at it this way. This system itself, if you take a look at it, is fairly simple, I believe, to make. I mean, it's really a lot of text fields that go onto a database, and you really just have to worry about things like privacy. And, like, for example, you've got these orders, right? The ID is their name and or their email. And that's going to go off to the restaurants. Well, some people don't like to know a history of what has been ordered, right? I mean, some people are hesitant to say that I don't want restaurants to know that I ordered tofu or don't like tofu or whatever. Everybody's different. So it was decided through the UX meeting that we're going to make it so that the names can be used, because being able to find out something that is by specific ID or whatever was going to be a problem later on. The developer had talked to us, he was there. So after these discussions, we then figure out, okay, what is the best, thank you, what's the best way to do this and what language and all that. And that's where the developer comes into that UX meeting and they help determine it. I believe that this kind of app can be developed in many different ways. So I mean, there's a tons of program, and you're literally looking at the same image, right? This does not have to change at all. It's mostly text-based. It gets off to an email. The email comes back. It's really saved in a master database from what the developers told me. And there's not much to it. Order history, again, that's just pulling from the database itself. No logins needed for all the members. So you're only looking at one master login for the person who is going to maybe send off the order, and also maybe the same person who is now the account manager. So you only need to have one login for that. So you guys tell me, what would you code this in?
I'd put it in Angular,
Okay. Anybody else?
but you're gonna need some form of data storage.
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna need a website, a domain for somebody to get it.
Okay.
Really depends on what the customer wants to give you at that point in time, right? Like, is the data important to keep where they have it, or do they want to pay for some sort of like cloud storage or something? Where are they going to store this data for this database, right?
Yeah.
Is it just going to be on the admin's phone? Like, you know, you could do that, I guess.
Yeah.
If you want. It's so, you know, there's like a million ways to slice this, really. Like, the UX design, that's kind of, I don't think that should care about what technology it's coded in, really.
But I think it is important to, through the UX discussion, to make sure that it can be coded. And
that's fair, yeah.
and so I think that through this meeting and some validation here, it looks like it can be without too much issue. So
yeah, it's a pretty simple design, so.
Yeah. Exactly. I think that having something lightweight for inner office kind of ordering, it should be lightweight. You should be able to get to what you need to, because people are literally going to take 5 minutes, look at the menu, I want curry, put it in there, out and done. You know, I mean, and they're going to get these emails like every day. What do you want for today? I don't know. Let me look at them. You know, it's all that stuff. So we're avoiding all these pain points because they're clicking on the menu, deciding themselves, you know, really what they kind of want. So when it comes to the accounts itself, you would be able to see all the restaurants in the given area. I would probably add in a zoom function here, but that's, again, not a big deal for the needing it in a prototype. I mean, that's a standard Google Maps thing, right? I don't think that's really hard. The restaurant area, what they want to choose, and then it would relist these based upon the area radius. And then choosing the lunch group, who's the email going to go off to? This department, that department, or whatever. And within each of those departments, you can add in your people from there. So instead of clicking and choosing every individual person, you're just selecting the group. And again, it gives the office manager or the admin easy, understandable ways to send it out to. And then finally, the send button. So when this gets done, you're looking at, you saw the customer, you see the reviewer, or they can click on the view menu to verify the people who are looking to get the food, and then saving it out as the PDF, order history, and that's good there. And then finally for the accounts I thought was something interesting. You can be able to hover over and see the different restaurants. So it gives, and again, it's a standard Google Map thing. This is where the location of your company is, or their company that would be using it. You have the individual names with links off to their respective menus. And so if they liked it or didn't, so they can hover over here and they can click, like, I like that one, I didn't like that one, you know, maybe we should delete that one. So they can do all those things. And then if they want to add a new menu, they would click on Add Menu, add the new restaurant, and then add in the link to it, and they would be done to adding in a new one. Then they would choose their team, or they can click Add New Team, and then they finally click Send and be done with it. So very lightweight app, simple to use, easy to understand. And that's in the gist of how the plan goes from UX to the UI in a prototype. You now know and have educated yourself into what way you would do this in XD, what way you could do this with UIzard or an artificial intelligence or template-based system, and it's covered the whole ground here. So now you have kind of understood how this all works. The last thing I want to touch in on XD is the templates that you can choose from. You can just email me if you want to about this, but right here there are tons of different icons you can find out there. This is made from Adobe. They had a whole library list of where to find fonts, where to find your photos for free, and different tutorials. These I use all the time. Like Let's XD is great. There's a couple other ones that show off new features from Adobe, and just different places you can check out the newest and greatest stuff. So, getting back to our presentation to finish it off. If you can be able to do it now all yourself, come on, there we go. Hello. So why would you need a UI UX designer? What's the point? Well, if we remember that app that we had made, I spent like 2 hours with the client trying to figure out all those things ahead of time. You've got to have somebody who understands not just the design, but who understands what makes an app successful. You've got the problems from what people have. Why are you making an app in the first place? If you can't find the problem, then there's no point. You've got to understand the brand alignment. What is it you're making and how is it aligned with the company who's making it? The customer feedback and analytics, you've got to be able to understand and do the proper research. Because if you're not doing that, then you're just making apps for app's sake. Analyzing it through personas and user journeys. There was a lady, Ashley, that had a UX discussion a couple hours ago. She went over some of this really well. But the personas and user journeys are basically who is your perfect person and how can you always reference back to them? Because this is the person who's going to buy whatever you're making. So you need to find who that is. And what is their journey? How did they get to finding your product? How are they using their product? And how are they circling back and telling their friends about the product? You have to launch it, or you design it, like what we just did today. You have to do the development feedback. So you launch it, you get the feedback from the launch, and then you've got to figure out what do we do right? What can we improve? And you do the iterative process. So that's what a UI UX designer can help in all of these processes here. On top of all that little pixel moving design work that we do. So to recap, we talked about that study again. Half your time is basically used on rework. On average, you only have 4 hours of writing code a day. The poor communication equals more work. And what I'm teaching is better communication equals less work. So, what's next? That looked like a lot of information. You know, how in the world can I learn all this stuff? Well, I'm solving that problem too. So, I am going to be doing a series on YouTube called the 30 Days of XD. It will be for free. Each video is going to be roughly 8 minutes or less. And it's going to teach you how to do this for free. All you have to do is sign up at 3das.com/XD to be the first to know when it launches. I will not be using your accounts as some sort of odd spam technique. Guys, I just want you to be able to do this. That's what I care about. So, and I'm just going to let you know that this is going to go on. I'll update you on the next videos that are coming out or whatever. Or if I don't have time, I won't. You'll just get YouTube notifications. But the idea is that I'm going to continuously offer you value so that you can do this yourself. If you want to push the envelope a little bit more and have one-on-one training, I do offer consultations. And I do that if you go to 3das.com/411. That downloads my V card that has all my contact information, because the thing I hate more than presentation slides are business cards. It's a waste to this society. You don't need them. You need a V card. It's right in your phone and you've got my information. And that is it. So I want to thank you guys so much for spending the time with me.